leadership. It's the PowerPoint slides. We're going to leave the lights on for this series.
Okay.
And then another document I just recently came across on servant leadership. A couple of professors at the University of Nebraska have done a scale and a construct around servant leadership, which I found very interesting and helpful. And so we're going to introduce that today, and we're going to use that a little later on. And we're going to use it in our small groups when we continue small groups after this presentation. So I'm going to begin with the slide series, and have them follow along. Current notions of servant leadership are not new. They're found in the words of the ancient philosophers and in the teachings of Jesus. In Mark 10, 42 through 43, Jesus called them together and said, "You know that the rulers in this world lord it over their people, and officials flaunt their authority over those under them. But among you it will be different. Whoever wants to be a leader among you must be your servant." Servant leadership is a philosophy and practice of leadership articulated by business executive Robert Greenleaf in his highly influential book, Servant Leadership, which was published in 1977. This concept of leadership has since been popularized by many contemporary leadership and management writers. Many of the norms and current approaches to servant leadership were envisioned by MIT professor Douglas McGregor in his classic work, The Human Side of Enterprise, which was published in 1960. McGregor's view of human motivation was expressed in two theories, Theory X and Theory Y. At the time that McGregor did his work and published that work in 1960, there was a prevailing view in management about human motivation, and he called that Theory X. And Theory X had the idea that employees are lazy, they dislike work, and they will avoid work if possible. And Theory Y, which McGregor developed, said that employees are ambitious, they are self-motivated, and they will exercise self-control. Theory Y helped point the way toward models of work, organizations, and society that were characterized by increasingly participative, interdependent, authentic, inventive, and productive relationships. Other people who followed McGregor, people like the great management theorist Peter Drucker, really then began to introduce the ideas of participative management, and that began to really change things, I know, in the United States, in the American workplace, beginning in the 60s and 70s, and different tools like management by objectives. Drucker did a very famous book called The Effective Executive that talked about participative management, and he also saw the trend coming toward the shift to knowledge workers really dominating the workforces as our whole society was changing. And that just began to cascade into a whole sequence of participative management approaches, and servant leadership was one that emerged out of that. Now, unlike leadership approaches with a top-down hierarchical style, servant leadership instead emphasizes, and these are the key words, collaboration, trust, empathy, and the ethical use of power. At heart, the individual is a servant first, making the conscious decision to lead in order to better serve others, not to increase their own power. The objective is to enhance the growth of increased teamwork and personal involvement. One of the leading proponents of servant leadership has been Ken Blanchard and his associates in his company. Blanchard and Associates are really management consultants. Blanchard was most widely known for, in the 1980s, he wrote a huge bestseller called 1 Minute Manager. And after that, everything he wrote kind of was golden. And he tends to write a lot from also a Christian perspective. And one of his really good books is Lead Like Jesus, which we've used in various settings. I really love Blanchard's work, and one really good book on leadership I would recommend to you is one of his newer books. It's kind of a compilation of his work over time, and it's not just by him, it's also by his associates. The different chapters are by different associates, but it's called Leading at a Higher Level by Ken Blanchard and his associates. And it really has a good, it condenses his work over the years. He and his associates developed a method called situational leadership. It's in your pre-read material. We're not going to spend a lot of time on that today. It's actually the pre-read material for leadership styles, but you will see it in the book Leading at a Higher Level, and it's an incredible management tool for when you delegate and when you're working in a supervisory capacity. Blanchard includes a chapter in his book Leading at a Higher Level on servant leadership. Their discussion of the roles, practices, motivations, and egos of servant leaders provide excellent insight on the qualities of servant leadership. Okay, let's look at the roles of servant leadership. And to introduce these two roles, this gets us into the pretty classic discussion about the difference between leadership and management. And for a number of years I've heard a critique that in the United States that America's corporations are overmanaged and underled. And I have found in my observation from churches over the last 20 years that our churches are overled and undermanaged. We have exactly the opposite problem. And that raises the important distinction between leadership and management. And so I want to get into that distinction a little bit, and Ken Blanchard makes it in a very good way here. But this has been a passion for me for so many years. And back when, in our early years in MCC, we had to write for ordination, we had to write a paper. And I chose church management as the subject of my paper in 1979. And of course, at that point, a mentor to me through his books was Peter Drucker, and there were others. And I had had some 9 years of experience in the nonprofit health field in a management position. So I kind of came into the church setting as a full-time pastor with that backdrop. And a year later, I was writing this paper, and so my first chapter was the pastor as a leader, and the second chapter was the pastor as a manager. And my thesis was that you have to have a blend of both in the large church situation to really be an effective pastor. And so this is a good synopsis on one slide of the blend of the two. Ken Blanchard, he has this great ability to simplify things, just make them so clear and simple. And so here's a clear role. If I were to summarize the role of, particularly of a pastor as a leader and a manager, but I think that's going to be true no matter what field you're in. If you're in a leadership role, if you're working through other people in the organization, that capacity to have both of those skill sets is so crucial. And especially as Stan pointed out earlier, if you recognize that you are strong in one area and weaker in the other, to staff to balance. And its growth will be stunted. And so here's the two roles. The visionary role is the leadership aspect of servant leadership. It is strategic, it sets direction, it's about what the organization stands for, what it intends to accomplish, and why. It will be really shaped in things like vision, core values. It's about clarity around the purpose of the church, its mission, who do we want to reach and serve, what are our most basic values, what do we want to become, what is God calling us to be and becoming in the years ahead, what's our goal, what's our major goal out there ahead, and then the capacity to bring alignment throughout the whole congregation toward those goals and consistent with those values. That's the visionary role, the leadership aspect. The implementation role is what he calls the servant aspect, and this is operational, or I could substitute the word management or managerial. It determines how, when, and where accomplishments occur. This has to do with setting goals and objectives that will reach the bigger goal. And it helps people set and achieve goals. And both of these are crucial to effective servant leadership. There are four, next slide, what servant leaders